Megan Davis out of Relay, and we are here for a Black Girls Town Hall. It is entitled "Where Do We Go From Here?" I think I'm here kind of as a neutral party, right? And this goal is to really make this a conversation. A lot of us have had kind of sidebar conversations about what has really happened, what's truly transpired. And so we just wanted to bring together some old friends and some new friends together, just to really talk about where do we go from here. A lot of times, after this whole election and this politics and what's going on, even energetically, a lot is going on. And so we just wanted to bring this conversation really up to the forefront, and just hear some different voices, some different perspectives. But I wanted to kick us off, and I want to turn the stage over to my girl Najma. If you want to introduce yourself, and then you can just lead us on.
Sure. Thank you, Megan. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. I know I've been talking about this for weeks and weeks, so I'm super excited that we are able to come together tonight and have this conversation. For those of you on TikTok, I see TikTok is blowing up. We couldn't get everybody to stream in, so I'm going to be pointing it at my screen. But if you desire to have a more intimate conversation and join us intimately, please go to Najma Smalls in Real Life on Instagram. Najma Smalls in Real Life on Instagram. And it's spelled just the way my name is. Anyone else want to shout out their Instagram? No? All right.
Aisha at Aisha
Megan will
Tatum.
also put, go ahead, Aisha. Aisha Tatum. Aisha Tatum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rukia Lumumba. Dr.
And
Latanya White. It's
meet
Dr.
Dr.
White.
White.
Meet
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
White, yes. And Megan Adarile. Yes. So anyway, let me share how this all came about. After the election, I think we all, many of us were heartbroken and some even devastated. I know I'm the first to say that I was definitely devastated by the election results, right? And part of the reason why was because I felt like it was sort of a slap in the face. Why is it that it's so hard for a woman to get elected in this country, right? Let alone a woman with African ancestry roots, right? And so for me, I feel like our country is supposed to be the leader of the free world, right? We are supposed to be the most forward thinking. We are supposed to be the ones who are leading the rest of the world in terms of technology and advancement and progressive ideas. But yet, here we are facing a lot of bigotry, facing a lot of prejudice, right? Still, right? It took us forever to get the first Black woman elected as a vice president, right? And so here we are still struggling. So it let us know, I think it put it right in our faces that there is still a glass ceiling, y'all. There is still a glass ceiling. There's still prejudice. There's still biases. There's still bigotry that is still running rampant in this country. And it's not just a matter of the fact that, you know, a woman didn't win. It's the fact that who they lost to, it was also heartbreaking. Okay. So also within that, I've been watching all of the comments and so forth that people had about it. You know, everything from this isn't our country, we need to leave, to we need to rest, right? And to some degree, I agree with that. But also, y'all, I firmly believe we built this country. Let us not forget that our ancestors built this country, okay, with their hands. My great-great-grandfather built the university that I graduated from before he was even allowed to be able to attend it.
Wow.
My ancestors and relatives own land and property in this country, right? So we have just as much right to be here as we have to be anywhere else. So I think it's time for us as women and as Black women to stand up and fight the system, okay? And this conversation we are going to have is so that we can come together and talk about what we need to do, to fight. Yes, we rest, but there's still work to do, y'all. And so I've invited some great women here to have this conversation with us. Megan Alderelle, she is awesome. She's really mastered professional spaces and helping businesses that are run like you, that by people that look like us, to gain advancement within this country. Rukia Lumumba is so awesome. I heard her speak during CBC weekend. My friend invited me to a networking event, and I was like, "Who is this woman?" And she has a history. I'm not going to go into her bio, but just know that she has a history of activism in this country. Activism is in her blood, in her roots. There's a lot of firsts that come from her family. So I'm super excited to hear her speak. Dr. Latanya White, who's always cheering for us, who believes with every fiber of her being in Black wealth, and that Black wealth can be ours, and we can pass down generational wealth to our families, is here to talk about next steps from a financial perspective. And my girl, Aisha, she and I are both going to talk about healing and being emotionally whole, y'all, because what it's going to take for us, we have to be emotionally whole as we continue this fight, right? Because it's going to take a lot out of us. It's going to take a lot out of us as we are pouring into others, and as we are fighting these obstacles and so on and so forth. It's going to drain us sometimes, and it's going to hurt. This isn't easy. This fight that we're doing is not easy, but we are here to tell you how you can be whole and how we can be emotionally whole so that we can see each other as partners, as sisters with a gift to bring, versus looking at you and seeing you as a competitor, right? And so this is the importance in this conversation. Also, I know there are many of you out there who are white women that are joining us. I invited our allies, and you call yourself accomplices. They said they're not allies, they're accomplices. Listen, we are going to have the conversation of how we can coexist and how we can work together and how you can understand who we are, and what kind of harms us and what we need from you. I know a lot of white women have asked, how can we make spaces safe for Black women? I think that's an important conversation, y'all. How can we make spaces safe for Black women, right? Because there's a lot that goes on in our head and in our hearts when we enter, especially spaces that are predominantly white filled, right? That's not easy for many of us, right? That's where imposter syndrome comes into play, and code switching and all of those other things. So we're going to have those conversations. This conversation is not going to be easy, y'all. It is going to really root out possibly some biases that many of us may have, right? Because here's the thing. A lot of people voted for Trump. And we got to ask ourselves why. And they weren't all white. They weren't all Latino women, but we got to ask ourselves the hard conversations. And we're going to even ask, is the two-party system even working for us at this point, okay? So I know I just went on and on about that. So I'm going to turn it back over to Megan. Again, if you were just joining us, I'm going to share with you on my screen, but you can also follow us on Instagram, Najma Smalls in real life. And you can also follow either of the ladies as you see their names up. Megan Alderelle, Rukia Lumumba, Dr. Latanya White, Aisha Tatum. Follow them if you want a more intimate look at the conversation. All right, Megan, I'm going to shut up.
No worries. Rukia, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, if you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, sure. One, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be on this panel with you amazing women. So very grateful for the opportunity. Again, I'm Rukia Lumumba. For everybody who's tuning in, welcome. I am the director of the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. I am also the founder of a local Mississippi based organization called the People's Advocacy Institute, which works to provide transformative justice opportunities in the South. So, system alternatives. But talking about my day job, right, at the Electoral Justice Project. So, the Electoral Justice Project was formed in 2017 to serve as a political home, a loving political home for Black people, to really come together to debate and to realize the strength in using the tool of electoral politics as one of the tools in our arsenal, not the only, but we recognize it as one important tool in our arsenal to really gain the better conditions that we deserve in this country as Black people. And our theory of change is that if Black people are taken care of, then all people are taken care of, that we've created the better conditions that we all deserve. And so we recognize that. The Electoral Justice Project is a Black woman led um, entity, but we welcome everybody. And so that's a little bit of the work. We are a part of a larger ecosystem known as the Movement for Black Lives, that is very different than BLM. Where Black Lives Matter. The Movement for Black Lives is an ecosystem of over 100 organizations that come together to engage in debate, strategy development, and intentional, strategic alignment towards our common goals. So we have something that's called the Vision for Black Lives, where you can go to and see our agenda or platform of all of the issues that we tackle. Again, we're a coalition or a network made up of over 100 organizations. We are across the United States, everywhere that Black people live and are. So I direct one of our tables or departments, and that's the electoral department. And so that's a little bit about us. Yeah.
Nice, nice. And Dr. White, if you can just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're about to bring to this conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much. It is, amazing to be in community and share this space with you all. I'm Dr. Latanya White. I am the founder and CEO of Concept Creative Group. And at Concept, what we're really focused on is closing the skills gap and the wealth gap in our communities through this evidence-based approach that emerged from my dissertation research. So I studied the lived experience of Black entrepreneurs, first generation Black entrepreneurs, and their desire, their intent to create these better economic opportunities for their families and for their communities. And so the main thing, there are two major findings that came out of my research, but the hill that I will die on is that try as we might, as excited as we are, generational wealth and research proves this. What we understand generational wealth to be is actually not the answer that we think it will be. Our high net worth, ultra high net worth counterparts, we've been conditioned to think that wealth is on money. And that's the lie that we need to unlearn, because our high net worth and ultra high net worth counterparts, they are passing down more than just money. They've just told us that that's all there is to it. They've told us that our family name, our family history, our family recipes don't mean anything when a lot of the products that we use in our kitchen cabinets, that's somebody's family recipe. So who's to say that my auntie's macaroni and cheese, right? But what you see behind me is actually the framework for dynastic wealth. And it's the idea that there are actually 5 forms of wealth. One of them being quantitative. So that's our real assets, the stuff you can put in the bank. But the other 4 forms of wealth are qualitative. Their family history, there's family identity, it's relationships. And how do we package, protect, and pass down these 5 different forms of wealth. How do we transfer that wealth in 4 directions? And then how do we control it for at least 3 consecutive generations? So that's the framework for dynastic wealth. And a part of what I'm looking forward to sharing with y'all is how that idea connects to emotional healing and where we go from here.
Perfect.
Mm.
And then Aisha, before I ask my first question to the panel, if you want to just tell people who it is that you are and what it is that you do.
Well, good evening, ladies. I am so honored to be here, Najma. Thank you so much for the invitation. I love being a part of such a beautiful collaborative experience here with such amazing women. I'm going to keep it short and simple. I'm Aisha. I'm the founder of Integrative Wellness, and I teach women how to heal from emotional trauma so they can become who it is they are meant to be and live that legacy and pass that wealth down in all its formats. And that's me.
Perfect.
So let's get
Yes,
started,
yes.
Megan.
And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Megan Davis out of Relay. I am a spiritual advisor, a master coach, and I really help those who are in their seasons of transition to really begin to build their businesses so they can get to the next level of peace, purpose, prosperity, and ultimately to their profits. And so I really work with women, primarily men, and talking about legacy, family legacy of spiritual healers and entrepreneurs. And I teach those that we have something, we are something, we're going to be something. And so let's put the structure, the strategy, the curriculum behind those things so that we can ultimately leave legacies. And I think it's funny for us to kind of have this conversation. And I know even for me, having a PhD, having an MBA, I know it's a whole bunch of degrees, right? That's here on this panel and experience and certifications. And I think that one of the lessons that I truly learned is that regardless of your presidential candidate opinion or preference, we can all agree that this election was wild, right? And one of the biggest things that I think stuck out to me the most was you're not even the most qualified. You don't have to be the most qualified to actually get into positions of power. And I think that that was one of the biggest things. Like when you look at qualifications between the two candidates, right? No matter what your preference is, you look at someone that has years of experience, that has degrees, qualifications, experience, and that person's marketing message maybe did not relate, right? And so, Dr. White, I guess my first question for you is, and I was very intrigued with your framework that you did your dissertation on, right?
Mhm.
Can you just kind of describe to us a little bit more about, what this diagnostic wealth is that you said, and how
Mhm.
it really relates to emotional healing? Because
Mhm.
I think that this election really triggered a lot of people
Yes.
emotionally.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so, a family reaches dynastic status. So we know this word dynasty, right? We know the TV show. If you're a politico, then you probably can recognize, say, the Kennedy family or the Bush family as a political dynasty. One of the things that I came across in my research was this phrase of a family dynasty, an entrepreneurial dynasty. And so I'm, digging in the crates, going down the rabbit hole because what is that? I've been through business school. I was teaching entrepreneurship at an HBCU when I first heard of it. And I was like, but how is this new to me? And so as I began to do the research, what I came to learn is that a family reaches dynastic status when they have maintained control of their wealth or their business. So think of, say, the Rockefeller family from a wealth perspective versus the Walton family, the Walmart family from a business perspective. When they've controlled that for at least 3 consecutive generations. Now that's anywhere between 60 and 75 years. And the way that connects to emotional healing and emotional well-being, especially in Black families, is because we have to acknowledge our financial trauma, right? We have to acknowledge this ancestral narrative of financial trauma. Like I studied the Black wealth experience from 1874 to the present. So 150 years of trauma around money, right? So in 1874 with the failure of the Freedmen's Bank, there was the equivalent 150 years ago, the equivalent of $3 million that newly free Black people, men and women, had earned and deposited into banks that failed. Now, where would we be if 150 years ago those $3 million had been in the bank earning interest? So now, even though I may not understand why I don't like going into the banks, why I giving people a side eye when when they calling me on my phone, that's a part of my ancestral narrative, right? And so
Mhm.
having to reconcile what is the energy that I have around money, what has been my relationship with money, what have I seen my family, my parents go through when it comes to money and providing for us, and how does that translate to what do I do now? Because I'm still a first generation wealth creator. I'm still reeling from my grandfather not being able to get his GI Bill benefits because here I am carrying all this student loan debt, right?
Preach.
So
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, and I think it's very interesting. A little bit about kind of like my background as well is I have a family temple that has been within my family for 3 generations. My grandmother down here in South Florida, she was one of the first Black women to own land. Right, she had blocks of land,
Wow.
and I just and I was actually there before I came on here today of us setting up to renew the space and to bring people together. But when you were talking, that made me want to throw a question to Aisha, right? Because I know that Aisha frequently talks on really us healing and how things are passed down within our DNA. So I know you have some thoughts on that, Aisha.
Uh-oh.
Is she free?
Do definitely. I know that can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now we
Okay,
can.
because it said
Yeah.
the connection was interrupted. So yes, we can definitely store ancestral trauma, and as a result of storing this ancestral trauma in our body, we can have reactions like what Dr. White said. Like we don't know why when somebody calls us from the bank we're triggered, or when we, have another experience, we're like, wait a second, our nerves start to jump. And I think that's why it's so important to learn certain techniques to start working through this ancestral trauma, because as we heal that, we won't pass that down to our children. We'll break that cycle. And so I think that that's one of the most important things, that we can begin to focus on as a collective, sharing these strategies. How do we heal this DNA trauma? How do we heal ancestral trauma? How do we learn not to internalize the pain over and over and over and over again? Because at the end of the day, America has shown us who it is, what it is. That's just what it is. So as a collective, how do we mobilize from that point and begin to heal from that so that we don't keep on being disappointed by the
Right.
outcome?
Mhm.
While we don't have our whole emotional state attached to something that's outside of our control anyway, and they already show us this is who we are, this is what we stand for. We already know this is a jacked up situation for a criminal to be the president of the United States. I mean, so we as women, and we as Black women in general, and our what are they, allies, our advocates, our
Accomplices.
our accomplices, you know, us as a collective, we have to continue to do the work on ourselves and not allow these external forces, to the best of our ability, to still hinder our own well-being. Because as long as that continues to impact us, how can we show up in our purpose? How can we pass this wealth down? How will we be in the right mindset to really lead in the way that God is calling us to lead? So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I know, Dr. White, I'm sure you have to leave us in a few. But my next question for you really is, based upon your framework and a lot of your professional experience, when it comes down to prioritizing, what you feel like we should focus on, where within your framework do you feel that we should kind of put a focus in to help us to move forward, to figure out where it is that we're going?
Right. And so I would say probably, so let me actually just introduce the 5 forms. So of course there's financial wealth. Those are your hard assets, right? Those tangible assets. And then there's spiritual wealth. And it's not tied to religion per se, but it's this idea that you're driven in service to something greater than yourself.
Mhm.
So financial wealth,
Mhm.
spiritual wealth, then there is this wealth of knowledge. That's where we're, exchanging the oral histories and the family recipes and things of that nature. So that I don't have to start from scratch. I can start from your knowledge base, right? Next, there is intellectual wealth, where as a collective, like as a family, after we're learning what everyone loves to do, because I don't know what all my cousins do for real, right? I just pray it's all legal. I mean, I think it's all legal, but but
Listen, look,
but making sure that we know that we're connected to each other's passions, skills, and abilities, and then we're investing in you becoming the best version of whatever that is. And then the last form of wealth is relational wealth. So to get to your question,
Mhm.
Megan, I think the spiritual wealth is probably the catalyst, because that's where we go from having this idea that it's about money and it's about real estate and it's about this business, to how does this impact my family?
mhm,
Yeah.
How does this impact how I show up for my community?
Mhm.
Right. And with spiritual wealth, that's where the reckoning, for lack of a better term, that's where that comes into place, because that's when we have to literally like buckle in and get ready to have conversations with auntie and them and grandma and them
and
about
ancestors in
about
them, right?
Right,
exactly,
right.
exactly.
Yes, nice. Thank you. And Naj, my question for you is, especially when you had this idea to bring all of us together, what were some of your biggest things that triggered you in this election? Because sometimes, in order for us to know where it is that we're going, we have to have that understanding of exactly where it is that we are. And so, what was the most triggering things that happened to you during this time frame, that was like, no, we got to get together, we got to have this conversation, we have to invite more people?
Ooh, I think it was a couple of things. It was several things. I think, for one, the thing that triggered me to have this conversation was the question popped up in my head: what do I tell my daughter?
Mm.
Because, we tell our kids, you can be anything, you can do anything. That's not the case. you know, that's not always, and so that's what this made me think, is like, well, can I tell my daughter she can be
Mhm.
anything? Because she's going to look at me and say, can I be the president? How
Mhm.
long will it take me? How long will it be
Mhm.
before there's another vice president that's a woman, or that looks like me? How hard are those things to do, right? And so that was the first thing. I think the second thing was when I see the elders. I grew up in uh, rural South Carolina. Many of my elders grew up when it was Jim Crow, they in the heart of Jim Crow. So things like this, I watched them become very triggered. And I watch them as they watch, the debates and so on. And many of them will say, these are the very same verbiage that they used in the 50s and 60s when they wanted to segregate us, when they wanted to keep us on the other side of the tracks, and so on and so forth, right? This is the very same words. And so you see that in your loved ones, and it makes you know that you have to do something. There is something that has to be done, right? And it's like Dr. White said, being connected to being a part of something bigger than you, right? We want to leave this country. When I leave, I'm hoping that I leave my mark, and I leave it better for my daughter, because the elders left it better than when they were here for us, right? But there's still work to do. And I think also when I was seeing people saying, okay, we're going to rest, resting is good, but there was work to do, y'all. We can't stop. And then I was seeing, some of our white counterparts on social media, and they were saying, what can we do? We don't like this either. So that's why I wanted to, those were the things that triggered me and wanted to have this conversation.
Mhm.
And Rakia, so a lot of the work that you do is in Mississippi, right? So some of what it is that kind of goes on. I know a lot of the parts of Mississippi that I've been in Alabama and Arkansas, and some of those places. it's not always surprising the level of racism and segregation and everything else that still exists. And so, can you just kind of talk to us a little bit about your work and how that has really had an impact on, how you and your team is also moving forward during this time?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So one, I wanna really say like thank you to Dr. White and Aisha for really grounding us in the conversation around wealth and like healing and understanding our trauma. I was just recently watching a YouTube interview. Neil deGrasse, that could be a little, sometimes stuff can be, but you got to watch all the things. I enjoy watching all
Mhm.
the things. And he had a scientist on, a Black woman scientist on, and she was talking specifically about how our DNA is changed over a period of time based on our reoccurring experiences. And it only takes 2 generations to change that DNA.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I really appreciated the conversation because what was really highlighted in it for me, and she was a Black woman, and they were talking about Black people without saying Black people, right? But it was clear. Um, and I really appreciate it because the way she talked about it was about the opportunities that it presented. To be able to understand how a particular event or a particular smell or a particular taste or a particular environment um, shifts your reaction based on your parents, right? And their parents' experience with it, and how we can use that to really begin to solve for, right? Solve for good in good ways, as well as solve more challenging experiences, right? We can create better experiences based on knowing that information. And so I just really appreciate y'all sharing that. And I think we need to talk more about it. One of the things I think I'm so grateful, Najma, for you having this session and including this diversity of women talking about this issue, is because I do believe that we have to have conversations that bring wealth into the conversation, that bring healing into the conversation, that bring traditional techniques of electoral politics into the conversation. We need to have more sciences in the conversation. Like, it's all connected, and we need to be having these conversations. I think one of the ways we were challenged this electoral cycle, both in rural communities, but also just in working class communities, period, across this nation, is that we weren't talking to our people in a way that they could hear us and it resonated. Had we been talking like Dr. White was talking about
Mhm.
wealth, in all of the formats that it comes in, I
Yes.
think we would have been able to get more people excited and engaged, right? And so I think we have to engage in self-critique to understand where we went wrong, and also
Right.
understand what we could be doing better. Um, so wanted to say that. Also wanted to really share that despite our big loss, right? We had many losses, yes, but we also had some wins. And I think it's important to acknowledge where we had wins. In 7 states, we saw the right of women to choose passed through ballot initiatives in 7 different states. That's important, right? We saw many down ballot initiatives, and down ballot initiatives are those opportunities where we, as voters, as residents of a place, get to choose to vote on the policies that we want. For folks don't know, and so we also saw in a couple of states, we saw the passage of legislation, of initiatives, referendums that provided money back to public school, right, as opposed to moving it to private and charter schools, right? We saw the passage of, in 3 states, minimum wage, $15 minimum wage, and paid sick leave. That's big, y'all, right? Those are important things. And we saw this even in places where folks may have voted for like like a Trump, but they also voted for better conditions. And so we have to pay attention to that, because even in a place like Mississippi, right, where, let me be clear, down south, Black people vote. In Mississippi, Black Mississippians vote at a higher average than anywhere else, than the national average, than anywhere else, right? Black Mississippians, right?
Wow.
So we vote, right? We come out like Black women come out every time. Black Mississippians come out. So we ain't worried. It ain't because we ain't showing up to the polls that we not winning. I'll just let you know that, right? Um, Also, Black Mississippi has more Black elected officials than anywhere else in the nation as well, right? It's hard to know that, right? Because we have such a red state, which actually in about 10 years, I think will be more purple. We moving a little closer to where we need to be. We got a little setback with these next 4 years, but we're going to be
Yeah, absolutely.
right.
Can you tell people what purple is?
Yeah, so
Or-
purple is it's not quite blue, it's not quite red, but you're on your way. You're on your way to progressive, right? And so it means that we may have a governor, a blue governor, like a Democratic governor, but we may still have a supermajority state legislator that is predominantly Republican, right? So it's creating more of an atmosphere of a diverse political scene than what we currently have, where we're predominantly we're a red legislation with a red governor, right? A lot of local, hyper local Democratic mayors and things like that, but not a lot of higher level decision makers. So that's what that means a little bit. I feel like I've been kind of rambling, so maybe I will slow down. Yeah.
You're good. You're good. And so, Dr. White, when it comes down to, like a lot of your frameworks and your experience with your clients, what are some like practices? And I'm going to ask this question to everybody. What are some like holistic practices, self-care practices, well-being practices that you would just recommend for us to maybe start doing, for us to really begin to heal, to de-stress, to move forward?
Mm-hmm. And in the work that I do with Black families, because I don't just work with the entrepreneur or the founder, I work with the founder and their family. So the first generation wealth creator and the family. And one of the first things that we have to do is basically this mindset shifting. And I like to start that with facilitating reading circles. The Whiteness of Wealth and Entrusted are like those two places where I go, but individually, beginning in 2025, I'll actually be launching the Dynastic Wealth Affirmation cards. So these are those, literally affirmations that are about my role and my responsibility to create, to package, protect, and pass down wealth. Because a lot of the things that I like as I was reckoning with my own feelings and my own grief around the election results, it was like, okay, what can I control? Right? Like, let me focus on what I can control. I can't control how anybody feels about talking about money, but I can control how I show up. I can control my relationship with wealth and with these conversations about money, and I can control how much of a model I am to those around me. So the Dynastic Wealth Affirmation cards are one of those things that really tightens your locus of control around your own healing, especially around money and ultimately dynastic wealth.
Black Girl God Healing. What would you say?
I'm gonna answer that question, but I have a quick question for Dr. White though. So, Dr. White, here's my question: what should I be doing with my Black dollars right now? Right? Because that's the question everybody wants to know. And you see all these things floating around on social media. Here are the companies you should not support because they supported blah 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 blah. But I love my chicken, so I still want to go to Chick-fil-A. So
Well,
what do I need to do? What does
right.
this Black girl need to do with her Black dollars?
I think first, and we don't talk about this enough, is make sure that we are eliminating our debt. Because no matter how much wealth we are working towards attaining and packaging and protect, child, please, if the interest rate on your debt is higher than the interest rate on your high yield savings account, we're still, we're not doing ourselves as much of a favor as we think we are. So eliminate debt, like work to eliminate debt. Look into cash value life insurance. Like, yeah, the stock market, this, long-term investments, that, but really look into what they call becoming your own banker.
Mhm.
And that is one of the real things that the Rockefeller family did. They got these cash value life insurance policies where when you add money to it, it's like investing in the stock, but you can go and withdraw that money from your own bank. So when you need to finance a house, or you need to whatever you need, you're taking it from your own bank. So that
Mm.
again is within your locus of control, more so than what's happening in response to the election results and in the stock market. So eliminating debt and looking to cash value life insurance.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, Megan. Oh, go ahead, Aisha.
Something.
Real quick, because I know Dr. Tanya on the move here.
I know, right? We all got questions for Dr. Tanya.
I just wanted to ask you real quick. Is that the same as an index universal life policy,
Yep.
or is it something
Yep.
different?
That's it. The IUL.
Okay, perfect. Yes, ma'am. Listen, I just got my son set up with one of those 2 months ago, and I said, now it's my turn to get set up with one.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to answer your question, Megan. So my answer to that is twofold. Number one, I believe we each need to start by understanding what our values are. I believe every person on this planet needs to have firm values that they can cite and quote to everybody, and that's how you stand by it, right? And so when you know what your values are, that determines how you vote. That determines the purchases you make. That determines who you spend time with. That determines the things you say yes to and the things you say no to. Everybody knows in my life, they know I am woman first, Black woman first. I support women. Before I critique, I support, right? Give you an example. We had at our school a year or two ago, we got a new principal. She was a woman. First thing I did was say, we're glad to have you. Let me know what you can do. Let me know how I can support you. A lot of other women, before they even got to know her, they started critiquing her off the bat. For me, I start by supporting you because that is my core value. I'm firmly rooted in our community. I believe in us. I believe in the Black community. I'm going to spend my dollar with us. I don't care who likes it or who doesn't like it. But that's what I'm going to do. Because that is a big part of my values, right? And then the second thing I believe to help us all heal and self-care is having conversations like this. Being in a room, in a space with women who can fill you up is just so powerful. I believe we should make sure that we are filled every single day, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And we should be so full that our cup is running over. We should be so full that no one can ever say we're scarce, because when you feel like you're operating out of a scarcity mindset, you make bad decisions. You get pulled in the wrong way. It's easy for people to, get under your skin and pull you out of your element and so on. So that is why conversations like these are so important. Having people in your life, having women in your life that can fill your cup and pour into you, and vice versa, is so important.
Before we go on to Aisha, Dr. White has to hop off. So
we appreciate you, Dr. White. Thank you.
If you could just tell everyone how we can find you.
Yes, this was such a blessing to me. Thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to staying in touch. But I'm Meet Dr. White on all social, so Instagram, LinkedIn, and also one thing that may be helpful is the Dynastic Wealth Personality Quiz. So that can just kind of get you thinking about, well, how am I showing up? And then share that with your family members. So at the next cookout, right? we can start getting those conversations going. But that's on my website at meetdrwhite.com/resources. So I know this is the first of many, and my heart is full. I thank you all so much.
Thank
Thank you for coming.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
So one of the conversations, Miss Aisha, was I think you had sent in the group chat, right? The offline group chat was about the circulation of dollars, right? And it was just saying how a dollar really circulates within like the Asian community. I think it was like 28 days, and then maybe in the Black community for like 6 hours, right? And so when Naj
Mhm.
was just talking just now about moving forward and self care and everything else, what would you say to that to support one another, but also standing our ground, standing our boundaries, and maintaining, ensuring that we have that level of self care?
Well, before I back off the other question, if that's okay. I wanted to add that when it comes to some of those practices, I think we as women, as a collective, one of the most important things that I feel when it comes to moving forward is learning how to accept. Like, accept things for what they are, accept people, circumstances, situations, everything for what they are. And then learning how to tell a new story, like learning how to tell an empowering story, learning how to make yourself the victor and not the victim. Because I think oftentimes when we have these situations and we attach our emotions to it, to a specific outcome that doesn't happen, that causes us so much internal trauma, internal pain. Najma, you talked about not being able to have the clarity to focus, not being able to make good decisions. And a lot of times that has to do with these internal emotions that we're dealing with. So I would say that's so important. And when it comes to self-care, when it comes to taking care of ourselves, I believe that self-care is soul care, right? I believe that that's true self-care is taking care of our spirit. It's hard to create values when you're not even spiritually in alignment with a higher power, with God, with the one creator. It's hard to make moves in an intelligent fashion and mobilize and let your light shine and be a true leader when you're not, honoring yourself. I think a lot of times we as women, we, especially if you're a mom, your wife, or whatever, we don't really prioritize ourselves in the ways that we should. And I'm gonna speak from my personal experience. Y'all may be doing that. But that's been something, that I have personally struggled with. And I found that when I haven't really poured into me, when I haven't taken good care of myself, I'm not living a life in alignment with my values. I'm not, being intentional with how I spend money. I'm not being intentional with what foods I'm putting in my body. I may get stressed out and want to go eat a Snicker. So, it's all of that. And so I think one of the most important things when it comes to self-care is really just looking at ourselves and being honest with where we are, who we are, how am I feeling? What are some of the things that I'm struggling with? How can I improve? How can I celebrate me? And how can I begin to align my life with God's standard? Like, what is God's standard for my life? Am I living up to it? And if not, how can I begin to do that? And I think as we have those conversations within ourselves, it would be much easier to have a list of our values, to be intentional with this is how I'm going to take care of my soul, to be better leaders. It's hard to lead somebody when you bitter, full of resentment, stressed out, you're mad at your man, your child getting on your nerve, so being able to really, what is it called? Emotional regulation, being able to really have that space within ourselves and ground ourselves. And then that way we can cultivate that inner light and move with intention, like Dr. Rakia mentioned previously, moving with intention and focus. And yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, you can call me doctor. I'm a
Dr.
lawyer.
Rukia is loading.
I'll take it.
Dr. Rukia
That's
is
right.
loading. Yes.
No, but I just wanted to say, yeah, thank you, Aisha. I think that that's right on. And, even when we're talking about the loss of the presidential for, Kamala Harris, right? A Black woman, right? I think we and even as Black women who really showed up as usual and like came out, I think that we have an opportunity right now to take a breath, right? And to really assess and do everything that you just suggested that we do, and really just honor the truth that we have done what we're supposed to do, and we will continue to do what we're supposed to do. And that, when Shirley Chisholm ran, right, she didn't even get close, right?
Mhm.
Didn't even get close to a VP or any of it, right? And so the fact that we've gotten a step closer is also significant, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's important to acknowledge. And I ran for state representative in in my small district in Jackson, Mississippi. And the reality is we have to be honest with our girls and our young women. Like, it's not going to be easy. Just like it's not easy being Black in this country, it's not easy being a Black woman in this country, and it's not even easy being a woman, period, right, in this country. And that's for all of our accomplices out there, right? You know it, right? The suffrage movement happened after the abolition of slavery. And the only reason the abolition of slavery happened first was because it was more economically sound to happen first than it was for women to get the right to vote, right? Because if women got the right to vote, oh my God, does that mean women can own land too? What is happening, right? So, we have to be honest with our girls and honest with our boys, honest with our children in general about the reality of what it is we're trying to shift and change. And I think it's that honesty that will not only help them navigate a tough conditions, but also we can give them the inspiration and the tools and the skills to actually do it. Growing up, I come from movement family. Like, my father was, a human rights activist, lawyer for 25 years, ended up becoming mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, the capital city. Yeah, yeah, this was a man we would have never thought would become mayor. First time he ever voted was for himself, right? And he was in his 40s, right? And so, he didn't believe in the electoral process. My mother, on the other hand, was a firm believer. Every time it was time to vote, she took us right on with her to the polls, right? And so, and they were a loving couple, but just had two different opinions about the electoral process, right? And so, you know, James Baldwin has a saying. He says that what is it? Hold on, I gotta find it. I just had it pulled up, but James Baldwin says that those who say it can't be done are usually interrupted by others doing it. And so I share
Mhm.
that to say that there's always a time when someone will say we can't achieve it. But those of us who know, who have tapped into our inner purpose, who tapped into our spiritual awakening, right? Who understand that we have a greater purpose, we will do whatever it takes to reach what some feel is impossible. Because at some
Mhm.
point in time, everything that somebody said was impossible becomes possible. We know that for a fact. We wouldn't be here today had Harriet Tubman not believed that one day we would be free, we wouldn't be here. You know what I'm saying? And so I do believe one day we'll have a woman president. I do believe it'll be a woman president that will be much greater and better than any person we've had run thus far. And I do believe that the conditions will be so
Mhm.
that we won't have to fight to end a genocide, right, in another country, and also
Mhm.
fight for just have livable wages and affordable
Mhm.
housing, good health and food here in this own country. That we'll
Mm.
have everything that we need, and that she,
Mhm.
when she takes office, will be taking office of a country that is thriving, that is good to its people, that has created the universal health care and universal income and all of the good things that we deserve.
Mhm.
And that it will not be an uphill battle, but it will be just smoothing out the terrain. So, I believe it.
And I think that's important that how you said that, because, you know, um, I'm so grounded even within my own truth as much as the whole outcome affected me, it really didn't, right? Because it was almost expected. Like I was one of those people like, oh, I'm not surprised, right? Because even when I remember having conversations with some of these other people on here, I was just also saying like what him actually being nominated is probably a better outcome for the world and where we are. Because I don't know if people could handle a black woman in power like that. You know what I mean? And it's like it's sad, but it to me it was the truth of where we are as a nation, as a society, right? Because all the stuff that had been planned, um, but I think that some of the lessons that we can actually learn from the whole race and everything else is especially from business and entrepreneurs and us being career focused and career minded was I think it's important for us to have like a consistent slogan and to have a message, right? Because it was very clear what his message was, what his movement was, right? We have heard that since 2016 or maybe before that, right? So his message, his slogan, what he stood for was very clear. He had a strong belief in self, right? You can't tell him nothing. And so that's a lesson that we also need to take, right? He realized he was not the most qualified. When we were talking earlier, we said, talking the language and the simplicity of even how a child would understand it, right? Of not using big words, of not claiming to be a politician, of just being that businessman, right? These are all these kind of lessons that we can take away, just to really implement in of how it is that we can move forward. Um, Another lesson that I had wrote down as we were talking was simplicity and repetition, right? It's because a lot of times we have to dummy things down so much and repeat it in a way that any and everybody can truly, truly understand it, right? She had a lot of points, right? But he had a plan. And you might not understand and agree with everything, but you clearly saw what that plan was, even if it was a denied plan at some points, right? So you can have points, but it's effective to have that plan. And I really also believe that the power of our words really begin to create our reality, right? And so when we look at these things, you have to really begin to create that vision for where it is that you want to be, right? And you have to think about those things or what are going to make you feel a whole lot more empowered, right? What is going to help you to really focus in on yourself and your level of healing and your next steps and how can you make whatever it is that you're going through to be that much better. And so when we think about these things, right, it's not about what's happening in the White House. It's about what's happening in our own house.
That's right.
And so my question as we kind of close this first conversation out, and I feel like we could have so many more and go so much more. But if each of you wants to just answer the question of how can we support one another during this time, but also how can we not just navigate, but move forward?
Yeah. I could start us off. I'll be short. The movement for Black Lives is a political home for those that are seeking one. We are here. We believe in Black women leadership, but we believe in all Black people. And we are open to really creating a space and a loving home where we can debate, engage in unity, debate unity, right? And so our doors are open. You can go to m4bl.org, sign up to be connected with us. We are not only a network of organizations, but we are a network that believes in resourcing our ground to build stronger infrastructure. And so in the next 4 years, we're going to continue our push to build electoral infrastructure everywhere that Black people live. So we will be resourcing organizations and individuals that are doing electoral work in various cities and states and towns. So connect with us. We're also going to be revitalizing our Vision for Black Lives, which is our policy platform. And we invite you into that process to tell us what are the real priorities. We understand that, you know, as organizers, we don't always have the right answer. We think we know, but it's actually those of us who every day are living in the reality that know more. And so we want to make sure that we're tapping into our folks. So tap into us, y'all. m4bl.org.
Perfect. Miss Aisha?
I think that's beautiful. So I would say 3 things. First is the question would be, how do I need to support myself? Like, how can I support me and make sure that I'm, you know, being self-reliant, honing in on self-leadership, making sure I'm doing what I need to do for me. Secondly, I would say that another step could be potential check-ins. You know, like if you don't have an organization, you haven't researched organizations. Dr. Rakai has a beautiful, I'm gonna say Dr. Rakai,
Yeah.
beautiful organization. But even if you haven't yet found that, start with your inner circle, your inner community. Even women you see at the grocery store, start with a smile. You know, just basically just, you know,
Say that.
be someone that is just coming from a place of love and light and sharing and be welcoming, you know. And then I would also say, if you don't have an organization, start your own. You know, join other organizations, start your own movement, even if it's something small. I think one of the most beautiful things that we can do as women is have check-ins like this once a month or once a quarter or whatever, but just a cadence where we come together, we discuss, we heal. Like Najma has a beautiful organization and a group. Dr. Kai has a beautiful organization and group. And so I think that these are some ways that we can begin to support each other on our healing journeys. And don't be afraid to, you know, be a boss, get your own thing going, you know, start a movement, join a more than barriers. So that's my take on it.
Is Naj talking?
Naj, we can't hear you. Is she speaking?
I don't think so. Oh, now she's speaking.
Mm-mm.
Can't hear you.
Mm-mm. Well, Megan, in the meantime.
Yeah. So in the meantime, one of the things that I think that I learned from you, Aisha and Najma, I don't remember, but when we were going live, I don't know, this was maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. One of the things that we always asked each other on our calls, our check-in calls, was a simple question, right? Of how can I support you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if y'all remember that, but we will always ask each other, how can I support you? And I think that
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
And so I think that it's important that, you know, kind of like you said, is, you know, just check in on people. If you realize that people have a message, that if they have a movement, if they're reaching the masses, of just that simple question of how can I support you, right? Sometimes it just takes a moment. They always say that we're just a few connections away from, you know, our breakthrough and our opportunities and whatnot. And so just find those ways of how you can support each other, right? And I would also say that it's very important to really also get grounded in your own truth, right? To figure out your own spiritual walk, to figure out your own finances and everything else that we had kind of talked about earlier, because a lot of times we have to pour from not an empty cup, but our cup has to be full. And so when we begin to pour into other people, it's really important that our cup is full, that we're elevated, that we're walking within our highest level of who it is that we are, our highest level self at that time. And so it's really important for us to, be whole, to be full in order for us to really help each other and to make that final impact and go further. And so, just find those resources. And like Aisha said, I loved it. If, sometimes, and especially like with a lot of us, we are that change maker, right? We're that person that's going to fulfill that legacy, that's going to leave that legacy, that's going to lead that legacy. And
Mhm.
so if you have been searching for something and you can't find it, then that's probably a part of your greater assignment is for you to lead
Mhm.
that cause. Because if you're looking for it, then someone else probably is too. So
Mhm.
that's what I would say.
Mhm. Mhm.
Y'all can hear me, right?
You hear you
Yeah.
loud
Yes.
and
Okay,
clear.
perfect.
Yes.
So my answer to that is first, empathize before we criticize, right? And I
Mhm.
think we need to lend empathy, especially for our most marginalized individuals in this country. That is one thing that I feel like we lack. And I feel like people vote, and I get it. We all vote for what our self interests are, and all of those kind of things. But at some point, we have to understand the folks that are the most marginalized in this country, because and we, especially if we're going to really be beings connected to something that's bigger than ourselves. And I think it's so easy for us to criticize people who make different decisions than we would make, or people who don't look like us. But where is the empathy? Where is the empathy? Have a conversation, especially everyone they ask, how can we be an accomplice, an ally, whatever the case is. You sit down with a Black woman. Ask us what it's like. What is it like when we go into these predominantly white spaces to work 8 hours a day with people who don't look like you? Some people who, make snide, shady comments towards you. People who may not have your best interest at heart, right? What is that like? What is it like being a Black woman from Mississippi that is known to be, many people have a perception, or let me say this, has a history of racism, right? Like, for me, it's that I carry a lot with me coming from South Carolina, right after Jim Crow, having parents that were born and raised during the Jim Crow era, right? That has a profound effect on the person that you grow up to be, right? And so with all of that, empathize, understand where we are, who we are, what hurts us, what concerns us, what pains us, what angers us, what triggers us, right? And that goes for anybody. Immigrants that are coming to this country, instead of being so quick to say we need to kick them out and they're all rapists and whatever the case is, understand why they come here. Understand, listen, it's not easy to come to this country. It is not easy. You leaving everything you have behind for a place you don't know, and then you come here, you're faced with all types of discrimination. It is not easy. It's no cakewalk, as people think it is. So have these conversations so you won't make decisions, especially important decisions like elections, out of ignorance for that, right? And so I think that is one of the best things we can do. And I think, secondly, we each have to decide to do something. Going back to what you all said, we have to decide to do something, whether it's support an organization like Dr. Rakia's, whether it's, making sure that we vote with full knowledge of what we know, and doing all of the research, and not just listening to what we see on TikTok or what our granddaddy told us, having the full, arming ourselves with knowledge, supporting a business, a minority owned business, a Black owned business, whatever it is. We have to each do something. And that's, if we all commit to doing something, we can change the trajectory of this country.
That's right.
Perfect. Does anybody have any closing remarks?
Mhm. Thank you.
Yes. And
Thank you, Dr. Rakia. I appreciate you. I appreciate all of y'all for your time and for coming on and for having this conversation. It has truly been a delightful. I hope everyone has gained something. I gained something. Folks on TikTok stayed with us and they are coming on and sharing their thoughts and so much and liking and saying yes, exactly, and so on and so forth. So this has truly been a dynamic conversation. I appreciate y'all.
Yes. And I think we need to come back, at some point in the near future, because I know it's a lot of topics that we have not even discussed, right? And so if anyone out there, wherever you're seeing this, if you have any thoughts, message, DM us, drop questions for the next time, that we go live. I know we had conversations about hair, racism that we've experienced on the job, working in corporate America. It's so many different topics that I know that we did not touch tonight, but I just hope that everyone at least enjoyed and gained something from this introductory conversation. But love and light to you.